Welcome to Machine Coding Interview. I am Sanjay, and in this course we will discuss the class diagram of bill sharing system like Truecaller. So let's see the requirement first. So the first requirement is user should be able to register. Means there should be a user class in our class diagram. So let's see the class diagram. So in the class diagram, we can see that we have created a class user which has a name, phone number and email. And then we have a method register by using which the user can register. The second requirement is user should be able to update his profile. So from this requirement, the user class is already created, and for the profile also we will be using the user class. So no more class needs to be created from this requirement. User should be able to add members in the group. So from this requirement, the main candidate of a class is group. So let's see how the group looks. So for group, we have created this class. So the group will be having a name, created at, and description. The next requirement, group creator can make admin to other members also. So from this requirement, you can think that admin will be one more class. So the user will be admin when he is creating the group or when some admin is assigning him as a user. Okay, and other members will also be the user, so we don't need to create any other class for member also. And admin can add or remove other users and expenses. So from this requirement, we can see that we can create expense as our class in the class diagram. So here we have created the expense. The expense will be having name, created date, description and amount. User should be able to create a group. So we have already created a group in our class diagram. User should be able to add expenses in the group. So we have already created the expenses group and user in our class diagram. User should be able to see the history of the expenses in the group. So here for history, we will be using some queries to fetch from the expenses. So we don't need to create any classes from this requirement. User can see the amount to pay or receive anytime. So for this we have created paid by class and have to pay class. Okay, so by using this, the system will be able to tell that how much amount will have to pay or how much amount have been paid for the user. The next requirement is if a user is not added to any group, then he should not be able to see the expense or other details of that group. So from here we can see that a group can be created as a class and expense can be created as a class. Okay, but this both class have been created in our class diagram. In the next requirement, expense can have pending and settled status. So for settled and pending status, we already have group status, okay, which is an enum. Once settled, all the members owe amount should be 0 and app should notify all the members with their owe amount or receivable amount with the other members. So for this, we will have to create some notification classes. So I have created a notification class for that, and this notification class will be extended by the app and SMS. Okay, so here you can see that notification is an interface which has the send method, and this send method will be implemented by its subclasses. And for this requirement, once settled, all the amounts should be 0. So this we are going to handle in our application. A member can also add expense without a group with other member. Okay, so in this statement, for all the nouns, we have created a class and there is no new noun which can be candidate of a class. An expense in the group not necessarily splitted equally if other members have not used the service for which the expense is created. Means if the user has not availed the service, then he should not be payable for that service. So for that we have already two classes which is paid by and have to pay. By using these two classes, we will be able to handle that business case. Like if the user has paid, then his record will be entered here, and if he has not availed the service, then he will not be in either of these classes. Okay, so the example is given here. Like few members going for a trip might have used a cab, but other went by their personal bike. So the split should be only among the members who hired the cab, right? So the members who have taken the cab, they will all be in have to pay expense, and the users who have paid for the cab, they will be in paid by expense. And the members who have taken their own personal bike, they will not be in any of the classes, like they will not be in paid by and they will not be in have to pay. User can also choose the category for which expense was made, like food, beverage, medicines, travel, etc. So for this we have created expense type. Okay, and here we have all these expense types. The next requirement is after group expenses are settled, no expenses should be added in the group. So for this we will have to write the business logic in our application. But in this requirement there is no noun which is a candidate for the class. This is all from the requirement side. Now we will see how we can establish the relationship between the classes. So first we will see the group, okay, and in the group we have the name, created at, and description, and the group will be using the strategy, settle up strategy. Okay, we want to establish a relationship between a class and an interface. We always use dots. Okay, and this is the dependency relationship, means group is dependent on this settle up strategy for settling up the expenses. Here we are using uses because this group is using the settle up strategy. Now the settle up strategy is having two strategies, split min max strategy and split equally strategy. So these two strategies are extending the settle up strategy, means these two strategies will be having the implementation of this settle method. Now each group will be having the expenses. Okay, so if you have created any group in Splitwise app, then you might be knowing that you should be add the expenses and other users should be able to add expenses in that group. So one group can have multiple expenses, and that's why we have the composition relationship, because without group there will be no expenses. But ideally in our application we are allowing the user to create expense in a group and without a group, right? So this would be just the dependency relationship like this. Okay, so group is dependent on expenses because the expense is an individual entity. It is also dependent on the group, but it can be created individual without any group. So here the group will be having the list of expenses, and that's why we are creating a reference variable. So this means group is having the expenses variable which is of list of expense type. Now the group will be having the list of admins, means in a group there can be multiple admins. So this would be many to many relationship, because one user can be admin of many group and one group can have many admins. Now the next relationship between group and user is settled by, means one user can settle the group. So there is one to many relationship because one user can settle multiple groups and one group will be settled by only one user. Then we have the create by relationship between group and user, because one user will be creating multiple groups. We have one to many relationship, but one group will be created by only one user. The next relationship between group and user is participants. One group can have multiple participants and one user will also be participant of multiple groups. So we have many to many relationship here. Okay, the next relationship is between the expense and the paid by. So there can be multiple paid by for a particular expense, right? And there can be multiple have to pay for a particular expense. And that's why we have many to one relationship. Means one expense will be having multiple paid buys and one expense will be having multiple have to pay. But one paid buy and one have to pay will be part of only one expense. And that's why we have one to many relationship for both of this. Now the question is how these classes will be used. So let's take an example. A group with multiple people are going for a trip. Okay, few people have hired a car for that. So few people who has paid for the expense, they will be part of the paid by. Okay, and the total will be calculated from that paid by and it will be stored in this expense table. And now all the peoples who have to pay for the expense, they will be part of the have to pay expenses, right? So if 6 people are traveling in the car, then all will be responsible for paying for the expenses. So they all will be part of the have to pay expenses. And the people who has paid for the expense, they will be part of the paid by, right? So I hope the relationship between paid by and expense is clear. Now the relationship between paid by and user will be many to one relationship, because one user can be part of multiple paid by expense and one user can be part of multiple have to pay expenses, right? But one paid by expense will be only for one user, and that's why we have many to one relationship here. it is like Vinay has to pay 40 rupees for the car expense. Sachin has to pay 30 rupees for the car expense. Suman has paid 100 rupees for the car expense. So this is how the relationship between expense paid by have to pay and the user. Now there is one more relationship between expense and the user. So the expense can be created by a user. Okay, that's why we have one to many relationship between user and expense. So this is the created by relationship. The second relationship is paid by. Okay, so one expense can be paid by multiple users and one user can pay for multiple expenses. That's why we have many to many relationship. The next relationship is have to pay expenses. So there will be only one relationship between expense and user because the paid by and have to pay expenses have already been established by these classes. So we can remove these two relationships, right? So there will be only one relationship which is created by. So this is one to many relationship because one user can create multiple expenses and one expense can be created by only one user. Now between the expense and expense type, we will be having many to one relationship. Means there can be many expenses of one type. Like for travel, we can have many expenses. For food, we can many expenses. Okay. Generally, if we are establishing a relationship between the enum and classes, it will be mostly one to many relationship because the enums are generally used for the status or type. Okay, and for those status and types, there can be multiple objects. Okay, so yeah, I think we have established the relationship among all the classes, interfaces, and enums. Now, that's it from this chapter. See you in the next chapter.